All right, so a couple takeaways from last night's first college football playoff ranking. First of all, 5 and 6, Clemson and Georgia. A little bit of an uproar. We know Clemson hasn't had the strength of schedule. If both of those teams went out, they're in the college football playoff. Really, if the top 6 teams all control their own destiny. So let's not worry about Clemson. Let's not worry about Georgia. Those teams, they win, and they are in. I think when you look at the Pac-12, Oregon and Utah at 7 and 8. I think that's a great spot for both of those teams. I think for one of those teams to get into the playoff, a few things have to happen. Both teams have to finish the season with 1 loss and win a conference championship, obviously. And I really believe Oregon and Utah are rooting for LSU to win the SEC championship game. One that would eliminate Georgia. They'd be out there at 6. One that would give Alabama that loss. And given what Alabama is right now with the strength of schedule, I think a 1-loss Pac-12 champ probably jumps them at the end of this season. So the Pac-12 sitting pretty. Both those teams do have to win out and face each other with 1 loss in a Pac-12 championship game. The Big 12 and Oklahoma. This is where I'm a little bit concerned for the Big 12 to get into the college football playoff. When you look at Oklahoma, what's left on their schedule? Yes, undefeated Baylor, who comes in at 12. And again, that will be a big game coming up here in a couple weeks. And then Oklahoma State, who snuck in the top 25 last night, which is a boost for Oklahoma. But is there enough equity, is there enough value at the end of this schedule for Oklahoma to really make a push when essentially all 4 Power 5 conferences are essentially boxing them out right now where they sit at number 9? And then, that Texas win doesn't look as great earlier in the season, so keep an eye on Oklahoma. Clearly, if they win out, they'll be in the conversation with 1 loss, but I think they're looking on the outside looking in. And then that brings me to Alabama and sitting at number 3. And some of the metrics the committee used last night was strength of schedule. That was for Ohio State and LSU, the reason why both of those teams are the top 2 teams in the country. But when you look at Alabama, they really have a terrible strength of schedule. They haven't played anybody yet. Their best win is against Texas A&M, who isn't even ranked. But the committee said multiple times, the eye test, the eye test, the eye test. And that's what you see with Alabama. It's always been a beauty pageant for them. And that's just the one concern I have. If you're one of these other conference champions with Alabama sitting at 3, if they lose a close game at home to LSU, LSU goes on and wins the SEC championship game, where does Alabama fall in that? Do they fall outside the top 5 or 6? They still have Auburn in the Iron Bowl. So interesting on how the committee is viewing Alabama to this point. Clearly, they don't have the strength of schedule. And clearly, obviously, they got to win these games. But keep an eye on them if they were to lose to LSU but finish the season with 1 loss. This brings me into what I proposed last week on our Big Noon Kickoff show on Fox, an 18 playoff, because who doesn't want to see more teams get a chance to compete for a national championship game? And I know we're not expanding to 8 right now, but this is, again, the criteria in which I would use, and I think it's inevitable that the college football playoff will have 8 teams in the coming years. All right, so we're going to take our 5 conference champions. They get an automatic bid. There's a caveat here. I was going to take 3 at-large bids. One of those would be an undefeated Group of 5 team. Right now, there are no undefeated Group of 5 teams, so they don't get a seat at the big boy table. We'll take 3 at-large bids. They will reseed the committee, the top 8, based on certain criteria, and then the top 4 seeds are going to host a quarterfinal playoff game. Host a quarterfinal playoff game mid-December at home. Are you kidding me? It's great for college football. It's great for the fans. A couple of the drawbacks of this and a couple of the arguments against, I think, it devalues the regular season and the non-conference schedule. I would just say, listen, when you're playing for home field advantage, that's important. That's what you do in the NFL. That's what you do at the FCS and the Division II level. You play every game to win, because when you are reseeded, the criteria will be, hey, who did you play in your non-conference? So you can't just go schedule whoever you want to get wins. It's about Power 5 wins. It's about winning a conference championship and potentially being a top 4 seed to host a playoff game. So I think the regular season, the conference championship matters. All right, obviously we haven't had conference championships yet, but based on the playoff rankings last night, this is what my 8-team playoff would look like. Your number 1 seed would be Ohio State. They would host Utah at the Shoe in mid-December. You're talking about one of the best teams in the country in Ohio State right now. The number 1 team going up against Utah. one of the best defenses in the country. I think that would be a fun matchup. All right, number 2, LSU facing off against number 7, Oregon. You're talking about 2 of the best quarterbacks in the country, maybe top 10 draft picks. You got Oregon, the brand, the flash, the uniforms, a complete team, a really good defense going up against LSU and that high-powered offense. You talk about Death Valley at night in a quarterfinal playoff game. I think that would be awesome. All right, 3 versus 6. You got Alabama versus number 6, Georgia. We've seen that matchup the last couple of years. That game went into overtime in a national championship game a couple of years ago. Those 2 teams hate playing each other. It's always a great game. Kirby Smart versus Nick Saban. Who wouldn't want to see that matchup? And then 4 versus 5. You got Penn State versus Clemson. How about Penn State hosting a playoff game? Happy Valley, a whiteout mid-December. Clemson, the defending national champ, coming into town. I think that would be one of the best matchups of these 4. Clearly, they win, they play in the semifinal, and that's how you should crown a national championship. Great for the fan base, great for college football, and it keeps all Power 5 conferences happy.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoy that clip, make sure you click subscribe somewhere down here. From game highlights to exclusive interviews and rankings, we've got everything you need as a college football fan right here, College Football on Fox.